So hi friends, in this video let us learn what is exception propagation, what is a custom exception and what happens if you are overriding our exceptions. So exception propagation is I'm calling a method where it is actually throwing an exception, but I'm not handling it, rather than I'm handling it in the method that it is calling. Okay, so that is called exception propagation. So here we have scenario that we cannot propagate a checked exception. It has to be handled then and there, whereas you can propagate your unchecked exceptions. By default, it handles on its own. So see here, I am creating a method display of where I am giving an array of two numbers only, but I am trying to access the third element. So I am also creating a method display one of. See here, this part of code I am not handling any exception, but here I am giving a try block where I am actually calling this display method of, and I am handling it here. Okay, I am giving array index out of bound e. Okay, so this is how I am giving array index exception occurred. Okay, so now I am calling my display method of. Now let us see what is happening. See, my exception in my display one of is getting displayed because I am calling a method display of which is internally calling my display, but actually I am not throwing any error over here and I am handling it over here. So this happens in case of our unchecked exception. Say I am giving here IO exception. Okay, so same scenario. So here instead of this, here I am giving throw new IO exception of IO exception occurred. Okay. See, it is showing me unhandled exception type IO. Though I am handling it in my callee method, this part of code would be unreachable. It has to be handled. Either I have to throw this exception. Okay, throws. Okay, so either I have to use throws or I have to handle this exception here itself, that is in my block where my unchecked exception is occurring. Otherwise it would end up in throwing me a compile time error. So the next part is we will learn about how to write a custom exception. So custom exception is creating our own user defined exception based on my need. So they are otherwise called as user defined exception. So let us see how to create a custom exception. I'll create a class my custom exception. Okay, so by default all my custom exception should extend my common exception. Okay. See, all the custom exceptions extend my exception. So I am creating a class exception. First I have to create a custom defined exception class. So here I am creating my custom exception which by default extend my exception class. So this is my syntax of my custom exception, where I am accepting a string and printing invalid number exception. Now let us go to our main class. So in my main class, what I am doing is I am creating a method validate, where I am taking an integer as an argument. So what I am doing is I am creating an object of my I'm creating an object of my class, and I'm calling my validate method. So exception dot validate of I'm giving as 5. So now my condition is, see here, now my condition is satisfied, but it is throwing me an error because I'm not handling my custom exception anywhere. So I have to enclose this in a try catch block. Okay, so now let us run this and see. So what happens is validate of 5. So 5 goes here, 5 greater than 3. My condition is true. So I should get my statement what I have given in my custom exception. Okay, now, invalid number exception. So this is how we create a custom exception. And the next would be exception overriding. How do I override an exception in case of checked and unchecked overriding exceptions? First, let us see about checked exception. So checked exception, what happens is, checked exception by default you cannot override it. By overriding, in the sense, when you are not declaring any exception in your parent, you cannot declare an exception in your child class as well. So see here, I am creating a method void display of, where I am printing in parent. So I am creating a child method where I am declaring a exception. So then it would throw me an error. It is not compatible because my parent is not throwing any exception, because I am extending over here. And okay, say I'm giving an exception here as well. So throws IO exception. So now my program will not have any error and it will run as usual. It will display me IO exception occurred, right? So see, what if my parent is throwing an IO exception, that is a specific exception, and my child is throwing me the higher exception? Then again I will get an error saying that it is not compatible, because my parent should have always be the highest range of exception, the higher order hierarchy, than compared to my child. But my child can have a lower hierarchy. Here it can be IO exception and my parent can have an generalized exception. So that case I would not get any error. So what if when it comes to the case of an unchecked exception? Okay, let us see what is happening when in case of an unchecked exception. So I will have a similar rule applies for an unchecked exception, that the parent should have the higher exception. But one advantage over here is, though your parent is not throwing any exception, but your child can throw specific exception. See, when I am throwing an IO exception, when I am throwing an array index out of bound, see, my error is not there. I can throw an array exception, or sorry, any unchecked exception in my child class. So now when we are running this would work. See, I'm getting my display. But same, I cannot throw exception here and make my make my child throw a small exception, because I'll again get an error that it is not compatible. So this is how the overriding exceptions when it comes for an inheritance works in Java. If you like this video, please do like, share and subscribe our channel. Thanks for watching.